Okay, so today we are going to be talking about Zenless Zone Zero. It is a Hoyo game, and it is no secret that MiHoYo really likes to take these inspirations from existing stories or from, mythology or from folklore, that sort of thing, and build up their own themes and plots around them, right? This means that if we can sort of suss out what ideas they're pulling from, we may be able to put together a fairly coherent image of our overarching, role in the story, or even some potential plot lines that we may eventually hit. So we're going to be doing that today. This is the first video for this game on this channel, so we're going to go ahead and just start with our main characters, as well as some elements that may be closely tied to them, either thematically or in proximity within the story, right? So with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it, yeah? So we're going to go ahead and start simple, right? We're going to be starting with Eos. Now, Eos is the bamboo that Bell and Wise use in order to guide people through the hollows, right? And its name is derived from the ancient Greek word Eos, which is both the word for dawn as well as the goddess who personifies the dawn, right? And we're going to be seeing a lot of this reference to radiance and to light and sunshine as we go through this list. It really does seem to be sort of the central theme for a lot of the very closely related characters and events and places to our main characters. Now, speaking of which, we have Wise and Bell's codename Phaethon. Now, Phaethon means radiant or shining one, and in the Greek mythology, he was a demigod who was sired by the sun god Helios. And the Where the Miracle Began trailer actually does make a reference to this, as the opening text we see reads, "Here lies Phaethon, who in the sun god's chariot fared, and though greatly he failed, more greatly he dared," which are actually lines taken from a translation of Ovid's interpretation of the myth, right? Now, for a quick Cliff's Notes, the myth revolves around Phaethon, who, upon learning of his lineage, begs his father to allow him to fly his chariot for a day. Now, Helios' chariot was responsible for towing the sun across the sky, which would explain the day and night cycles of the world, and the horses that pulled it were only really able to be controlled by his hand. And knowing this, he attempts to dissuade his son, but Phaethon remains undeterred, and in some interpretations he wins his father's begrudging approval, while in others he sneaks out and does it without his permission, right? Regardless, in some way he takes the reins and begins to drive across the sky, but as expected is unable to actually control the horses, which leads to the chariot running out of control. When it strays too far to the earth, it scorches it, which results in wastelands and deserts, and then when it strays too far, it kind of causes the lands below to freeze. And this was kind of used as a way to explain why there were so many differing extremes in temperature and, climate and regions, in different regions. Regardless, Zeus, receiving complaints from both heaven and earth, eventually chooses to just strike Phaethon down with a lightning bolt in order to prevent any further damage, and that's basically where the myth ends. So for a couple of minor side notes, first, Phaethon's body, after he was struck down, fell into the Eridanos, which was a river, and it does sound somewhat similar to Eridu. I don't think this is the actual derivation of Eridu. I think there is something that is a bit more direct, but we'll get to that in another video. Second, our Phaethon, Bell and Wise, were actually struck down themselves, right? We had to kill the name Phaethon in order to get the mysterious hacker off our trail in the very beginning of the story, which would make them, the hacker, thematically our Zeus for the game, whatever that might mean. Just some minor things. I don't know how much it's going to actually play into things. I thought it was just, very neat thematic ties to tie in. Now, while the myth's original purpose was to explain climate and stuff like that, Phaethon himself can sort of be seen as sort of this figure that allows his hubris to bring about catastrophe, right? He burns the lands and he freezes the seas just because he wants to kind of prove himself as the progeny of the sun god. And as a result is struck down for it, which I think might actually have some tie-in with our role in the story of Zenless Zone Zero, right? So we know that the twins' mentor is a guy by the name of Professor Arca, who founded Helios Academy. Again, Helios, right? Sun. On top of that, the guy is literally, a flame wearing a trench coat. Like, I don't think it gets any more direct than that. Regardless, the name Arca could refer to two things. Now, the first is very direct. It is the Greek philosophical and scientific idea of Arca, or the first principle. Now, this is a concept from which all other principles and ideas are derived, right? It is a proposition that cannot be deduced from anything prior. Think archetype, right? The type from which all other variants are derived. Or in other words, it is the origin or the beginning or the source. Now, the other reference is maybe a little bit more obscure, and that is Arca. Now, Arca was one of the daughters of Thaumas, a sea god, as well as the sister of Iris, the rainbow goddess. And in the Titanomachy, which was a story which told of the battle in which the Olympians overthrew the original Titans and became the primary deities of the Grecian pantheon, Arca had originally sided with the Olympians in the war, right? However, she later then betrayed them, and after the Olympians eventually won, she was punished by having her wings stripped and then cast into Tartarus. Now, we know that Professor Arca has been lost in Hollow Zero for an entire era, right? And another name for Hollow Zero is Limbo. So we're kind of playing around with the idea of this character and their namesake being cast into an underworld of sorts. So we're already drawing sort of connections there. So we have this goddess, Arca, who was essentially a traitor. She betrayed the Olympians. And then we have our old mentor, who is obsessed with his research regarding hollows and ethereals to the point that he would seal himself in limbo for this long expanse of time, right? And we're just gonna go ahead and work under the assumption that he hasn't just fucking died after all this time. I don't think it is too unrealistic to say that he may have turned face, or maybe he found something that caused him to switch sides, or maybe he is just so obsessed with his research that he would eschew everything else to, pursue it, even to the point of causing, harm to his fellow men. Essentially, right? In other words, he has become our enemy, is what I'm thinking. And then you have us as Phaethon, who on this mission to find their wayward mentor could be the key to inadvertently causing something awful to befall New Eridu, right? Unlike, in the myth where hubris is the driving factor behind this calamity, it is our own obsession, our own determination to find out what happened to our mentor. Right? I mean, as it already stands, we've already awoken one of the 4 keys, right? Fairy. And this was like purely through accident. So we've certainly gone and set something into motion, right? And now we don't know exactly what these 4 keys do or what their mission is once they've already awoken, or even if they're malicious at all. At the very least, they do seem to be operating independent of New Eridu's official bodies, as in the Miracle trailer, they do seem to have to hack into the database as opposed to being given official access. And I think on top of being sealed away and having some unknown precepts and missions that Fairy is very, very hush-hush about, I think it might be fair to say that their intents may not necessarily be fully aligned with the best interests of New Eridu. At the very least, thematically and narratively, the way the story sets them up, it does seem to want to kind of paint them as this sort of very cloak and dagger shadow group that, has questionable motives. And from our positioning in the story, we would be unknowingly helping them in that regard, right? And that's going to be most of it. One final kind of minor point I wanted to bring up was Lady Sunbringer, right? I mean, it's in the name, Sunbringer, right? Helios, the sun, Phaethon. I'm wondering if she's going to have any significant ties to the twins, whether that be, story-wise or familial even, because thematically, at least, they are very, very close. We've also kind of got these very interesting similarities in design. She does share Wise's hair color, and they all have these yellow and blue eyes, albeit hers are heterochromatic, while the twins is more of a mix in each eye, right? And then you have Eos. Now, Eos is designated as Bangbu 01. Now, this could just be its name, right? This could mean that it is the first model in the series, or it could mean literally that it is the first Bangbu. Now, we know that Sunbringer was the former CEO of the Marcel Group, and they invented the Bangbu. So if there is a close prior relationship here, then Eos could possibly be a holdover or a prototype or some sentimental thing from back then that was somehow gifted to the twins at some point. Finally, we also have like some minor similarities in color palette, but I think that's a bit more vague. We don't have too much about Sunbringer's design besides the one image that we've gotten out of her. So I think, the smattering of black and white that we see is not necessarily indicative of any sort of thematic relationship between her and the twins. And that is it. Fairly quick and easy, I'd say, yeah? Now, there are definitely some things that I missed, right? Like, I would have really liked to dig into whether Bell and Wise's given names hold any, significance. But they're fairly common words in the English language, and it was really hard to dredge up anything that had any, pertinent thematic relevance to their overall themes. So I wasn't able to find anything there. I'm sure there's something. I'm just stupid, right? But if you have watched this long and you've stuck around, thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you enjoyed. So I will see you for the next one, right? Bye-bye.